Well, welcome again, everyone, to another episode From There to Here. I'm your host, Lawrence Temple, and we have my guest, Dr. Ronnie Mack, here today. I purposely don't like to describe my guests too much because they're going to do the describing of who they are, but he comes to us from the world of higher education. I will say that. And I think I'm going to let him do the rest of his describing as we go on our journey here today.
Okay.
So, Dr. Matt, how are you today, sir?
I'm doing good. I can't complain. Like the Saints would say, blessed and highly favored. I can't
Okay.
complain.
There you go. Well, okay. So I told you in the audience, I'd like to ask you your elevator speech. So if you had to boil down your existence in a few seconds as someone on an elevator, unfair as that is, what would you say to describe you?
I would say my name is Ronnie Mack, and I live by the phrase building bridges by connecting people. My passion intersects education, coaching, community involvement, all centered around building relationships. Relationships is the only reason why I'm here talking in front of you today. God has blessed me through relationships. So that's one of my biggest passions is putting people together. If you had a couple more buttons, I would say some more stuff, but elevator ride might be over by now.
Okay, fine. Let's say, let me throw a couple more buttons on there and give me a few more seconds of description.
So I would say the connection piece is the big part. I think the undergirding part of my story is navigating failure and navigating mistakes and I had to live through a lot to be able to help other people survive those things. Mistakes and failure are not an endpoint, just opportunities to learn and make adjustments.
You know, that's a great jumping off point. From my work in public schools, we go to workshops and things. You know, people don't always like going to workshops, but one that was very memorable is when the book Growth Mindset was introduced to us here in the county. I don't know how many years ago, and the whole concept of that mistakes are not the end; they're just like a step or whatever. That stayed with me. Could you talk a little bit about how we can see failure and mistakes and what's a constructive way to see those things?
So one thing I will say is I give grace to your students because now their mistakes are in 4K compared to before. I was right on the cusp of like social media just came out in college.
Okay.
So there's some stuff that I'm glad was not recorded.
Okay.
But for them, at least for me, the fear of failure has always been a struggle. But there's so many lessons in life of people who have made mistakes, who have navigated things that create testimonies and paths for us to follow. So I think the biggest thing is failure is a part of the process. If you don't act, you don't perform. And I think a lot of times we get so frozen, and this is me kind of talking to me.
Yeah.
We get so frozen by what could happen that we don't even try. And I think that's a lot of things that's plaguing people today.
Wow. I see all these applications to that. Well, let's back up for a moment. So I like to say something that I know normally is false to my guests so that they can come and correct it. So let me say what I figure is false and you direct me. When you were, first of all, where did you grow up?
So originally grew up in the Atlanta area. Parents were originally from New York, but I was probably about 1 or 2 and grew up in a place called Forest Park, Georgia, south side of the Atlanta area. My dad, it's funny, I work for aviation school now. My dad moved from New York to work for the airport in the mid 80s.
Okay. Kind of full circle thing.
Yeah.
Well, all right. So this is my false statement. I'd like you to correct it. When you were in Georgia growing up as a little kid, you knew that you were going to do exactly what you are doing for a living today. You knew it crystal clear, never wavered from 6 or 7 years of age to right now. I'm sure that's probably false. Can you correct it a little bit?
So I would say that's false, not to like disrespect my elders, but I would say that's false. Majority of my life. So a couple things, 3 words I've been meditating on that really help guide some things is vision, belief, and faith for me. I didn't have a vision for life. I had no earthly idea what I was doing. I'm 37 years old and I'm finally figuring that out. I thought I wanted to be a Power Ranger, a police officer,
Okay.
random things, but like I didn't really have a lot of guidance. So yeah, I had no earthly idea that I'd be working for a university 30 some odd years later.
How did the higher education path happen? How did you get from there to here, if I can say that?
Yeah, so I will always thank my parents. It's I really have to thank my parents because I think it's one of those things where it's easy to tell somebody where you've been. It takes a lot of courage to tell somebody where to go, hoping that they'll have a better opportunity that they've never seen before. To me, it's like refugees putting their kids on a plane. Like, from my understanding, the US is a better opportunity. I hope it's something for you. So, like, my dad went to the military, and his famous slogan was, "Boy, you better not go to the army." I'm like, wow, that's terrible, terrible marketing.
Yeah.
So you better go to college. And my mom went and dropped out. So, like, they were like, son, you going to go to college, even though this is a place that they didn't necessarily get to experience.
Okay. Got that. Mm.
Mhm.
Did you consider not going, or did you pretty much, was that pretty much what it was going to be from high school on or so?
So I think for me, like, I always knew in the back of my mind I would go. I just didn't have a vision of how to get there. So once again, people were extremely, God bless me through people. I'll never forget. I was part of some like Men of Tomorrow, Men of Excellence program at high school. And Mr. Jenwright, if you ever watch this, I want to thank you. He took us on a trip to Georgia Southern. Um, I ain't never been to a college before. I ain't never really been out of Forest Park, Georgia at the time.
Mm.
But thanks to that trip, I know you need to have faith, but sometimes you got to see what the vision can look like.
Yeah.
So him taking us down there, him touring it, like, okay, college is possible. I can kind of touch the ground and see that there's a possibility for me.
I can remember when you're talking about the vision part. I remember when I was a younger teacher,
Mhm.
we took the eighth graders to Washington, D.C.,
Yep.
and we happened to pass through a shopping mall or something around midday when professionals were off, lunch breaks and stuff. And I remember my, particularly my minority kids, because it's such an African American presence there in D.C.,
Yes.
they were just blown away seeing well dressed Black professionals in trench coats and the stuff they've seen on TV
Mhm.
and seeing it. And I could just tell the impact. They didn't talk to these people, just seeing it. It
Yep.
impacted me, and I was a young adult at that time. So, yes, I can vouch for that. Seeing it, touching it, seeing that it's real has a real impact.
Yeah. And I replicated that in my life. Like, I would take my Bethune students. Um, so a little future part of the story, I was academic advisor for a little bit for education majors. So one part I would do is take them to classrooms, whether that's volunteerism, whether that's Read Across America. I need you to see it. You may not be in the school, or you may not even want to
Hmm.
go to education, but you can see it, or take you to conferences so you can see what it looks like at a larger scale. Because that's what somebody did to me. Like, they opened my eyes to something that I didn't think was possible.
Um, and I know, well, connection is a good consistent theme. Besides, what you mentioned, the gentleman who took you on that program, the Minamaro type thing.
Mhm.
How about other people that have been signposts for you along the way, either when you were in college or as a young professional or et cetera?
So I think a couple people. I think my grandmother, rest in peace now, always a spiritual. I mean, it's the common black trouble for praying grandma, but that's what I had. Like, there are some things where navigated, like, I did a lot of stupid stuff in life. That's why I talk about mistakes and managing those. And there's only reasons I got out of that had to be God. Like,
Got
I won't say more than that, but
Don't want you to.
praying grandmother. One of my mentors who came down and spoke here recently, Dr. Patrice Buckner Jackson. She was my boss in grad school, who I tell this story all the time. Where I was not the best student. I was a graduate student, common frat boy. I was doing more work outside of the office than in the office.
Okay.
And one day she called me in the office and said, "Ronnie, I want to fire you, but the Lord won't let me do it." I was like, "I don't know who this Lord you talking about, but I'll send him an email."
Okay.
So so definitely her. At the time, our dean of students, Dr. George Lewis, he was the one that showed me. In my head, it was kind of like this. We were standing at the second floor of our student union. It was like this kind of like Simba Mufasa moment where he just kind of pointed out the campus. He was like, people go to school to work at a university. I was like, people go to school to work here? And to me, that
Yeah.
just was a foreign language. So like him, and then a lot of peers actually, a lot of peers,
Mm.
close friends, Demetrius Smith, Tiffany Davis, students who are older than me, but really modeled Christopher Pugh. Like these were just people at my level and above that I may
Yeah.
not have said anything to, but like I watched their lives and how they, once again, back to the visualization, like I watched how they moved and I did some things similar.
Yeah. What how when you look at yourself now, how do the things, the mentors, the experiences you had, how does that now bleed into your passions today, as far as in your world of working with students, just your working world, period?
I think a couple things is I know people talk about the phrase gatekeep. I don't do that because people open the door for me. You don't understand the impact of just telling somebody they can do something and walking them around with you so they can see what your day to day look like. Because professionals did that for me. So like I always, hey, you want to know what I do? I'll sit down with you and tell you all of it. Or you want to know all my contacts and networks? Here you go. Because I mean, I ain't afraid of you stealing nothing from me because God would just provide me with something else. But
Yeah.
like I've always been the always like giving advice, always like coaching because I know how it was to fall by yourself. So like if I can, hey, I know a little bit more than you, take it, do something with it, or I'm always see myself encouraging others, whether that's dealing with our job or people's passions outside of that. I know post pandemic, a lot of my
Hmm.
coworkers wanted to do more. And it was funny talking to older, I don't want to say grown people like something wrong with them, but like adults who are just like, I do this, but I always wanted to do something else. I'm like,
Wow.
why have you done anything with that? Oh, I don't know. And there's nothing, I mean, there's pressures of life, there's kids, there's things like that. Um, but it's just amazing how many people have dreams that they just kind of sitting on.
Oh, wow. That is so big. I am a big believer in finding those things
Hmm.
myself. I find that sometimes younger people who thankfully
Hmm.
dream more than maybe
Hmm.
older ones, which I think is a blessing. Actually, I think sometimes they are frustrated that the thing they really love, they can't do it full time right now. Like,
Hmm.
kind of lost on them that down the road maybe you can. Don't be discouraged that you can't do it for a living all the time
Hmm.
today. And I think they let that discourage them maybe a little prematurely. Do you see that, or what would be your take on that?
Yeah, I see. I think the students I work with a little more. So I would say two contexts of people. I think students I've dealt with from my HBCU experience, a lot of those have those dreams and have to realize like you have to scale it. It's going to take time. Let's say I know you're a
Okay.
musician person. Maybe that's I start off playing in a church choir on Sunday, then I'm maybe doing a jazz show once a quarter, and then I'm scaling and building up. And I think social media has really, I don't know everybody says it, but I think it's true. Social media has really created unfair comparisons for people and it
Hmm.
has really shown the backstory of a lot of things. I think similar context, but different student populations. I think working where I work at now, people can look up. I work at Riddle. Students are very industry focused, which they're going to get the job. These are genius students, no matter what. But
Okay.
realizing that you can dream bigger than that. Your impact of your life is going to be more than you working at a position. So I think it's still the dream conversation, but it's some people helping them hone it in and scale it over time. Some people realizing that you need to dream bigger than just being employed.
I see that. Okay. Yeah. And I see that the pandemic stirred up a lot of that in
Hmm.
in people.
Yeah,
That was a, if we can say, a good that came out of that, kind of made people reset and
yeah.
kind of reach back to stuff they had just kind of glossed over. See, I think I've seen that in people's lives.
I agree.
I know. So you had experience. Now you worked at an HBCU at
Hmm.
Bethune, and
Hmm.
you're at Embry-Riddle. For those who don't know, it's a large aeronautical university here in the Daytona Beach area, or what we would, I guess, label a PWI, predominantly white institution. And where did you attend school yourself as a student?
So I attended Georgia Southern University from my undergrad degree and my master's. So my undergrad was in logistics and marketing, and my master's was in higher education. And then eventually I went to Nova Southeastern for my doctorate.
Okay. Can you shed any light on the experiences that you get gleaned in your HBCU experience, even as working at it? Because again, that's a world. They're being talked about a bit more now in the last few years, but many people don't know anything about them.
So for me, it was all new to me too. I remember we're not too far. Went to Georgia Southern from Savannah State, and then I heard my friends talk about, yeah, we got curfew. I was like, nah, I ain't going there. I'm good. I know there was hundreds of years of legacy and history that probably made more sense. But when people like, nah, we can have girls in the room and there's curfew, I'm good.
I got to interrupt because I went to the University of Florida,
Yeah.
and same thing. But I had friends who had relatives or whatever who went to Bethune right here in Daytona, where I was from. And yeah, same thing. They talked about curfew and all that kind of stuff, which was like, for that went different planet from Gainesville and UF. So I get it. Okay.
Yeah. But I tell people all the time, and forgive me, I'm looking at the screen and look at the camera, but I learned what a culture of care looks like at HBCU. Like we looked out for each other, but like care was like an expectation at Bethune.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell folks all the time, I'm seeing faculty members like, all right, baby, it's gonna be okay. Pray for a student. I done see them pull out their wallet, pay kids rent. I done seen them, boy, we going to the mall. You got this interview. We're gonna get you a belt and a suit by 12 o'clock. And I never seen nothing like that. Like Georgia Southern will point you to a resource. You know, talk to the dean of students office and hope for the best. But like
Okay.
I've never seen, and then just the spirit of transformation. Like you can take a kid from Broward, Miami, and they look like a whole different person in 4 years.
Say that.
And that's the expectation that they should be transformed. You create experiences, and people will love on you. They'll be honest with you. They'll be critical of you because they see more in you. And I never, prior to that, I ain't never seen anything like
I didn't need it, and I loved my UF experience.
that.
But yes, when I talked to my contemporaries who went to HBCUs, the type of fondness, I guess, that they had in talking about their experience was different than me and my other friends, whether they were people of color or not, who went to University of Florida. So I understand that.
Yeah.
Now, what are you passionate about these days as regards to what you do for a living? You coach and you motivate students and you try to pull out the best with them. What are some themes that if you had the world's ear right now, what would be some things you'd want to tell them about your world or what you're seeing in your world?
I think a couple things is the power of community. We need each other more than what we realize. So, like, how do you get people who would never sit next to each other in the same room and create solutions? We're not going to agree. There's so many religions and so many perspectives. We're not going to agree, but there's a lot of things we could work on based on community. And when I talk to people my parents' age and older, especially in minority communities, it's that like family, lack of a better word, family feel in neighborhoods and communities that was expected. That we really don't see now. Um, I think another piece that I'm passionate about is education is key and having a vision. When I talk to teachers, when I talk to K through 12 professionals, we talked about it too. A lot of kids just don't have a vision of what they're trying to do. Like, because I think if you have a vision, it makes the things that are troublesome, it's temporary. Like it makes it make sense. Like, hey, if I know that I want to eventually go to college and be an analyst, or if I want to be a project manager for a company, all right, let me just fight through this math class. Let me just fight through this other piece. But I don't know. I feel like a lot of our youth, and you work with them more than I do, but just conversations I've had, they
Yes,
need vision and hope is probably the biggest thing that I see.
that sounds so simple, but I
Mhm,
think it's very powerful.
mhm.
And I think the immediacy of social media and kind of the fantasy too. Like
Yeah.
when I was a kid, the irrational thing that a middle school kid would say when you say, Johnny, what are you going to be when you grow up? I'm going to the NFL,
Yeah.
NBA, sing, dance, rap, whatever.
Mhm.
Um, but now the irrational thing, I guess, that kids say now is something on social media. I'm going to be a social media influencer. I'm going to be a gamer that gets paid to people see me play type stuff.
Hmm.
And they don't go any deeper than that. Those kind of seem like the low hanging fruit, easy thing to say. And I like to share with kids that it's not the smart kid that does well. It's the one that can put off something today because they know I need to do this now for the future.
Yeah.
Whether it's this, I want to do my homework, but I need to so I can get good grades, etc. Being able to see down the road, even till just tomorrow, let alone years from now.
Yeah. And then like when you have vision, you can be creative in how you get to your destination. I think a lot of them, like, hey, I need to be an influencer tomorrow. Sometimes your regular job can help fund or support what that looks like. There's so many people I follow who are like, this is what it looks like to be an accountant. This is what it looks like. There's one gentleman who does a lot of professional development. I can't remember his name, but he started off as a med student and recording his experience as a med student that led him to be an influencer. There's a guy who is a professor and he just dresses really I guess you would call it a little eccentric, but I mean, it looks cool to me.
Hmm.
He just talks about what he wears, and like his everyday job enhances his like influence in other areas.
Wow, I see.
Mhm.
Being versatile, and I do think people feel like I can only be a thing like
Yeah.
forever.
Mhm.
That definitely is not the case.
Yeah.
If I ask, this is a question that I ask a lot of my guests because a lot of them end up having some connection with younger people or with
Mhm.
community. A lot of the things you're talking about. This is my standard one. A friend of yours has a son or daughter who's 18. They're going to graduate high school next month.
Mhm.
And they say, hey, my little Billy or little Sally, good grades. They've always done the right thing,
Mhm.
but they're just not sure about what they want to do after high school.
Mhm.
They're even accepted into some colleges, so they can go if they want to, but whether they
Mhm.
go or not, they're just very unsure about what they would like their life to look like. And if this friend says, "Hey, I've always looked up to you. Would you take Billy or Sally to lunch and talk with them?"
Mhm.
What kind of things could you envision yourself saying to Billy and Sally in that situation?
I think step one for me is tell me a story. Because then I like you're doing with me, I can sit back and listen to hear what key themes I hear a lot. Like what do you get excited about when you tell me a story? What's some things that make you lean in and lean forward? What are some things that you just can't stop talking about? Is there connections between those things? A lot of things I have a lot. So one piece I reflect on is a book called Design Your Life by Bill Burnett, and it helped me guide some of those conversations.
Mm,
When you look at things you enjoy, like what are those things? Like I know sweeping the floor because your mama told you to. That's probably not at the top of the list.
yeah.
But when you go through your experience, whether it's sports after school, one of those things that you've connected with. If I asked you to text 5 random people, what would they say are your strengths? What would they say about you? Because it's interesting because you'll see how they
Mm,
overlap. Um, I would challenge you to pray. Pray and see what God says about your future and your vision. If a person's open that conversation. And then like after we talk about that, I would just take a step back and say, these are the key things that I'm hearing. Like maybe you talked about, hey, I've always taught my brother and sisters when I was at a young age. I teach people on my cheerleading team. Sounds like
mm,
education might be it. Um, and after we talk about those key themes, what is a low stakes experiment that you can do based on that? So, hey, your auntie up the street at Mainland has been a teacher for 15 years. He just sit in her classroom. What does that look like? Once again, back to like what does that look like?
yeah.
You're on YouTube every day anyway. Can you follow 2 education influencers so you can see what behind the scenes looks like? And experiment. And as we move along, let's increase those experiments. And another big piece I ask them to do is write down their values because that's what's going to guide you. When you go to college, there's going to be a lot of information thrown at you.
Okay.
Your,
Mhm.
your foundation, your foundation is going to be the values and what you truly believe in.
And I don't think values is a word that a young person would even think is something I need to think about. They're thinking about talent, skills, resources. I don't think values is something they would even know I need to think about.
Yeah, I mean, it's what's gonna guide you because you can make money doing anything. Some of it legal, some of it illegal. Like you just need to
Okay.
figure. Hopefully, your value system steers you towards the legal side, and realizing money is great, but money can't be your end all be all either. Because people will use you and pay you to do some god awful things. So you got to have some values to say, be able to say no.
That's good. Yeah, that's true. And when you don't have the money, of course, then you think that's the answer to everything.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, yeah, you don't want to be desperate. I mean, people can play you when you're desperate.
yeah, that's it. I can see that.
Hmm.
In I would ask in your mentoring and coaching and that part of your life. I can remember again in my public school world, there was and is a lot of debate about who kids can be mentored by, who they gravitate to. Like, is it important that, say, person of color be mentored by a person of color, or a woman by a girl by a woman, or that kind of thing? How important do you think those commonalities are in mentoring situations? Are they helpful? Are they necessary? Are they mandatory? What would you say about that?
I think you need a team. You know what I mean? When Beyonce roll on stage, it's due to dozens and maybe hundreds of people, whether that's from makeup, whether that's the marketing, whether that's who's reserved her ticket, like whoever's doing, like it takes a larger team. So for me,
Okay.
yes, I enjoyed having people of color as an example, so I could visually see that. Some people I just need, I didn't care what you look like, as long as you got the knowledge base.
Yeah. Okay.
Or I have some people who are mentors in the spiritual space, some people in education and business. Like I think you need
I see.
a core team to guide you on that journey.
I and I mentioned this in a lot of these broadcasts.
Mhm.
Am I dealing with students, particularly in high school? Let's say if we're talking about a minority student
Mhm.
who's like, say, a junior, so they've gone through most of high school and they're doing well. One thing I
Mhm.
always pull them aside if I have that kind of rapport with them, and I encourage them to make sure that their circle is somewhat diverse.
Yeah.
That it shouldn't only be kids from your neighborhood, your background, your race, your whatever. And I never say it as if I'm downing their own background, but I'm saying this world is so big,
Mhm.
you need to be able to talk to everybody,
Mhm.
and glean from everybody. Can you talk about that aspect, the diverse aspect?
I think you have to challenge yourself to do diverse things so you can engage with different types of people.
Mm.
And I think another
Hmm.
part is knowing yourself too, because you'll be surprised once you know yourself and the interests and the hobbies and the visions you have, how different people will resonate with that once you kind of get below the
Ah,
surface. I mean, if
okay.
you like video games, it might be a black, white, Spanish, whoever person who likes that same thing. But you got to put yourself in these kind of diverse, not necessarily challenging, but like put yourself in these diverse experiences so you can engage people. So a little bit of bravery, honestly.
That's oh wow, brave.
Mhm.
Okay, that's a word we don't throw around a lot.
Yeah, we don't, but it's yeah. Like I mean, I think it's necessary. Being in a lunchroom and sitting with another group of kids, it may not be growing up in Compton in the '90s, but it may feel like it.
That's really good. And to you, it feels like that, even if
Yeah.
it's not really that. Yeah. Okay.
So it takes some bravery to do that. It takes some bravery to talk to people who are different than you. You know what I mean? And I think school gives you, well, should give you a safe space at least to do that versus out in the real world so you could develop that skill.
I see that. Now, well, in the time we have left, what about the tomorrows for you? What do you see in the future for the different endeavors or for you?
Um, a little bit of for me is casting a new vision of bigger things I want to see. Um, just random things I would love to see is community-based events so more people can connect across lines, political lines, or conversations. Because I feel like that's what college did for me. College introduced me to people I would have never engaged with. So I would love to see that for me in the future, increasing some of these coaching conversations because I was a student who I didn't have a vision, I didn't have a plan. I racked up exorbitant amounts of student loan debt because I was just ignorant. I mean,
Hmm.
ignorant
Hmm.
means not to not know. So I didn't know. So I would love to help people more with that. And then help people dream. I think especially folks our age too. It seems like after you get out of high school, like you just gotta let dreams go.
Boy, yeah, I feel like there are these dream funerals all
Mhm,
over the place. And I know as a public education person, and a lot of my former students are still around. I bump into them all the time.
mhm.
Boy, I almost feel like I'm going to a wake when I'm
Yeah.
talking to some of these kids who are only in their 20s. But I
Mhm.
will remember conversations I had with them not that long ago in high school about their dreams. I wanted to be such and such. And then they give me a quick litany of the things that have happened in life and why they can't do that anymore or whatever. And yeah, I feel really grieved when I hear that.
Most depressing thing I feel like a lot, and you can tell people don't really blink when they say this. Oh, how are things going? Oh, you know how it is, just working.
Mm.
We stay up for 24 hours a day, times that by 7 days a week, times that by how many days people live, and that's it. And not saying I haven't said this before too, but like just working, that's all to our human existence. That's just kind of sad when you say it out loud.
Wow. No, it is. I feel that. I feel that deeply. Particularly when I get to talk to older people and they'll regret that. I mean, they will appreciate the fact they did what they had to do, for their family and
Yeah,
then
yeah, yeah. Oh yeah.
that. But I this tinge of regret that comes in. And so I appreciate your work in trying to help kids not to have to walk through that, or if they walk through some of it to try to get out of that.
And then folks need to realize too, I don't care if you're 50, 60, 70 years old. I mean, God still got a plan. I serve at a church with a pastor who almost 70. I mean, you know full well who 70 years old starting a church. Most people say he was crazy. Other folks are starting acting careers at 60. Like people are starting businesses and dreams at 55, 70. Like it stops when you stop, but it gets better.
Having babies at 49. I mean, right,
Yeah,
ladies.
yeah. You know what I'm saying? Some people about to be 70 years old taking their kid to college. You know what I mean?
That's true. I have a cousin doing that.
But I mean, life stops when you stop. And I think it gets back to the vision piece of who can you put around either if you don't have people around you, what stories can you follow based on where you're trying to go? If you're gonna use like we gotta use
Mm.
YouTube for the tool it is in a better way instead of watching hilarious videos. Who's somebody 75 years old still working out, starting a business? Who is somebody in my case working in education, been divorced, but now they are financially free? Like, how can I use it to find these stories so then I can implement it? I can know so I can copy and move forward and do the same thing.
I love that. I love that having this. If you don't have a person to kind of escort you, let these stories escort you. I
Yeah.
love that concept.
Hmm. Yeah. That's another thing I probably should have mentioned earlier. Storytelling is I just really enjoy it because to me it's a free book. If I can sit down with people and get coffee with them and hear their stories, either A, I get to learn something more about them, B, I get to learn some lessons that I can build off of. And everybody got a story. We just gotta tell it. I mean, from a church standpoint, we talk about testimonies all the time. Um,
Hmm.
Marketing, we talk about the power of testimonials. Sometimes I won't buy something until I call somebody and be like, hey, what was your story with this product? Did it work for you?
Mm.
You know, so you tell me a story about how great Publix was. I'm going to Publix. If you like, I went to Walmart and they try to fight me, I don't think I'm going there. I'll take your experience. I think I'll be fine.
No, that's good. The last interview, or maybe the interview before that I did, the gentleman is the manager of an auto shop.
Mhm,
So I expected the conversation to be about that, and it was. But then it went in all these other directions. He plays blues piano. He paints all of these things, all these stories that had nothing to do with the one label that I knew him by. And
mhm.
just an example of how you really don't know people's stories. I think we look at people and assume, but we really don't.
People are way deeper than just the work that they do, and we just got to take time. Back to your diversity piece things too. Challenge the students to listen to each other's story before you make a judgment based on the other side of an argument. At the end of the day, you can still keep your opinion. I'm not here to change it. That's between you and Jesus. But but you can at least sit down and listen to somebody's story. So at least you have context to why you think a certain way, or you have context to what the opposing viewpoint is. It's just a story. You can close the book or keep reading. It's up to you.
I had this years ago when one of the kind of was just in the news, we were starting to hear about shootings of black men, the police, and that, and the issue was really starting to come to the fore. And I had a conversation at work with someone who, at least by our labels of parties and such, you would expect him to be maybe on the opposite side of me. But we had a real conversation about things that were just standard knowledge to me that he was just hearing for the first time. I was saying, Larry, is that true? Like, do you have to have these kind of conversations with your sons and stuff? And it was common knowledge to me, brand new to him, and it was an actual exchange of information that you don't often get on any topic today. So and we were telling each other stories is what we were doing.
Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, there's always the facts, there's always stuff you can research, but it's just something about a story about somebody I see every day, and this is your lived experience. It just cuts a lot deeper.
Well, then my last thing, you work at an aeronautical university. Do you fly airplanes? Because of course you do, because you work there, right? So of course you do.
Not even close. So I mean, I think there's another thing for your students too, is to do research in the sense of you can work for places that you always want to work, just in creative capacities that you would never think. So like I work at an airplane university, I don't know nothing about planes except how to buy a ticket.
Okay.
But people don't realize, like you were saying, like earlier, with their dreams and things they may want to do, and they want to do them quickly, they might be in places that they just never even thought about. We talk with our students all the time. All right, you want to be a pilot. You think you got to work at Delta, United. Somebody got to fly the execs at Walmart places. Somebody got to fly these NFL players. And these are organizations that you just probably would have never thought about. You know what I'm saying? Somebody got to fly these political leaders places. So your dream or your opportunity might be in places that you just never thought about. You just got to be creative and open and try stuff.
Try stuff. I love it. I think I'm gonna let that be the last word. I try to find a quote from the conversation to make the subtitle on the little thumbnail. I think try stuff might be the subtitle of this episode.
Yeah, legal stuff. Try legal stuff.
Well, yeah. I'll put legal in small word. I mean, I really appreciate this. Thank you for doing this.
Yeah, anytime.
Okay.